Well, people, season 2 is upon us on the Rich Life Projects, and I just appreciate everyone viewing and coming in on the projects. I appreciate it. Starting off season 2, we just a little bit of a different thing where I'm going to be interviewed and the questions are going to be asked to me, and it'll give you some sort of insight on my story and why the Rich Life Projects is evolved. I just want to put it out there that some of the content that I bring up may either disturb or may get some people off rails a bit. But if you are going through some of the things that my journey's been through, by all means, the things like Beyond Blue, Lifeline, going to people and talking about things that you're going through. There is always someone out there that will sit and listen to you. I hope you enjoy it. Any feedback, throw it my way. But this is the Rich Life Projects with myself, Rich Fogarty, going through my journey.
It's the Rich Life meets the Hammer Time.
We're
talking
we go.
About, we're getting the real conversations
Mate,
happening today.
collaborations going on.
Collabs. Mate, I just want to talk to you, obviously, about moving to Melbourne. It's great to have you and Rob down here.
Yeah, man.
Like, there was such distance between us, but now we're like almost neighbours.
Well, it's been how long we've known each other for probably about 20 plus years.
25 easy plus.
Easy years, been in the martial arts and the combat sports, but moving to Melbourne, I think it was just, we're in Newcastle, so I was quite happy to be surfing and just chilling out there. And Rob really loved the idea of Melbourne. And then I thought, well, everywhere we go, we sort of do business together. So, and I love Melbourne City. I've always loved Melbourne City, travelling to Melbourne for the fights or just travelling in Melbourne in general. But I love Melbourne. And once Rob sort of said, "Oh, that's it, we're off," and I was like, "Okay, we're off." By the looks of it, we're off.
I was going to ask you about that because obviously, we'd spoken in the lead up to you guys coming down here and stuff, and I know Rob, he's loving the restaurant life and the nightlife.
Him and the old coffees with the fingers up.
Him and the missus are embracing Melbourne fully. Yeah, and you're here too. Obviously, you guys come as a package deal, and I really respect and admire that. To be honest with you, I've got no siblings, but if I did have one, I'd wish it would be someone, had a relationship like you two guys, because you just, you're a team and you've done so much, as we spoke about, you've done so much together. So when you moved to Melbourne, Rob was, he fully embraced it, but you're here and you're doing what you do, but you still sort of long for a little bit of surf and Newcastle life and all of that.
Yeah, I love Newcastle. Rob doesn't love Newcastle as much, but I love Newcastle, one, because my daughter's up there, and that's probably the number one priority for me. But surfing-wise, I've got a lot of surfing friends. I've got a lot of just general friends that I've made over a 10-year period, and I just enjoy these days, as we spoken a little while ago. The older I get, the less I want to sort of be around humans, so to speak. But it's, it's just, I like to have my own time. I like the chilled sort of environment.
Yep.
But Melbourne City, I love the hustle bustle of Melbourne, and there's always sports going on. There's a lot of sports that now I've got involved with that I never even paid attention to before. Yeah. AFL for one. I'm a mad AFL dude now, so that's been a good change.
Obviously, for the listeners, a little bit about your formative years of growing up. Where were you born, and a little bit about your backstory, mate, that not a lot of people would know about.
The backstory, childhood-wise, born in Sydney, Camperdown. The old man was a copper back then in Newtown. Mum and Dad lived in Sydney for a while. And then we moved, obviously, because Dad had to move for the police. The really youngest memories I could probably think of is Broken Hill. We ended up Broken Hill because the old man was a copper out there, and I just used to – the only thing I remember really of Broken Hill was an old cartoon that used to play, Wacky Races.
Oh, yes. There's some childhood memories.
Wacky Races, where I used to be on the lounge all the time just watching the Wacky Races. That's really the only thing I can remember of Broken Hill.
Yeah.
And then – I think the old man got a transfer to Muswellbrook, and then we all moved to Muswellbrook, and we lived in a house behind the army barracks.
Okay.
And then the old man was a copper there, so that's where we Rob was born in Muswellbrook, so that's when the little white fella come along.
So you're the older.
I'm
of the
the
two?
oldest, yeah.
Jeez, I wouldn't think that. I thought,
well, you know,
he's got a weathered look about him.
I say that. I say when people go, "Oh, you guys actually brothers," I said, "Yes, I got the looks, he got the weight." But that's my little joke. Obviously, he would say, "Oh, that's personal, bro. That's personal." But yeah, life in Muswellbrook it was quite fun times, as in what I can remember, because we used to get up to mischief, going through the army barracks, having a bit of a look, and I remember Mum making Rob go down to the service station back in the day with a note saying, "I give my son Robert permission to buy a packet of cigarettes."
And that's when he took up smoking. Just took a couple of darts out on the way home. Just lit him up. He goes, "No, it's my commission, Mum." Getting on him.
Oh, man. But when you think about that now in these days, if you wrote a note saying my son, who knows how old, 5 or 6, go down the server and buy some cigarettes, I give him permission.
But, there's, I suppose for the younger listeners, you look at life now and you look at even just that little bit that you've spoken about. Everyone's so protective of kids and everything these days. Yeah. And you'd get up, you get on your bike and you just ride, and you'd be aware of your surroundings and stuff. But, it was different. It was totally different times of growing up and being outdoors. And you know what? You just spoke about wacky races. I mean, that's really about as engaged as you got with electronics back then. There was no phones, there's no PlayStations. You want to play, go outside and play, playing or you get your Matchbox cars and play on the carpet with them as a kid.
100%.
So, you had to make your own fun.
Yeah.
And I think, you guys have been very entrepreneurial, through your whole lives, really.
Well, we faked it till we made it. So that's how we put it. We always say, well, you got to fake it to make it.
Well,
so.
you've
But we put the hours and time in. I'll give you that.
Dabbled in a lot of stuff, and I think going back, I suppose the generational, a few generations back, you taught creative thinking because you had to be creative in your own. To make your own fun and to make your own money, as a kid. 100%. I got out with the push-pull lawnmower and knocked on doors and said, "Hey, I'll mow your grass," and then I discovered upselling. I'm like, "I'll mow your grass and I'll wash your car for a couple of bucks extra."
That's an extra $2. I can afford that cigarette then.
So I think growing up in those and like those areas, you guys would have had the same experiences, no doubt.
Yeah, a lot of different times, and Rob and I, because Dad was a copper, but then, the times when we moved to Newcastle, the old man had finished up the police station or police being a copper. And then we sort of moved to Newcastle and that's where we got introduced to hotel life. And hotel life, it was good. It was really fun in one way and really sort of down for me in other ways. But it was in Newcastle of all places where we've just moved from just recently. But we owned the hotel. Back then it was a gay and lesbian hotel. Yeah. So there was gay, lesbians, bikies, man. Islington around the Criterion days was like wild days because you're looking at 1977, 77-ish, 78, 79.
Yep.
And I can only remember, again, the hotel life because Rob and I just really ran our own race, like Mum and Dad putting in so many hours in the bars, day, night, never had really breaks or holidays.
Well, that's the thing when I know a few people whose parents have pubs, that's it. And you live on site, your lifestyle and your work just merges into one. A lot of people think it's an idyllic life, but there's no downtime. You're forever in your workplace.
Yeah, true.
And on top of that, you see the good and bad of humanity. You see people, and having worked in pubs like yourself for many years, someone will walk in sober, loveliest bloke, couple of beers in, they want to fight everyone and all the demons come out. That frontal lobe has been engaged and they're ready for war.
Some of those experiences that we experience in like the front bar and the night sort of band club at the back. The good part about sort of the hotel, because I remember going to school there in Islington and Mum and Dad come and watch me race one day and that was the biggest thing for me because one, we're out of the hotel.
When you say race, what were you doing?
Just kids racing at school.
Running
and
races,
I had, Mum and Dad, first time they've ever sort of come and watched me do something and I was like, wow, Mum and Dad are out of the pub.
Yep.
And I went hard. I won the running competition because it was an obstacle course.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was probably, if I had a childhood memory of Islington that day, I was proud as punch that day. I won that running race.
Just like you're trying to get away from Rob.
Yeah.
Just trying to get away from him, used to those obstacles.
And mum and dad come that day, and I was like, man, I'm super proud I won.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the hotel life, you know, there's so many things in the front bar. And then I remember there was this old lady who used to sit in the corner, and mum used to go, oh, you know, go and sit with this person, whatever. And to me, being young, I thought she was a witch. Like I had that much fear.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I always cry and yell, I don't want to be sitting with her. But then you start to see what happens sort of in the front bars and everything else. And then, but once mum and dad were in the hotels working their ass off day and night, me and Rob really, the best part about the hotel life, me and Rob just really run our own life.
Yeah.
You know, we had no supervision, which was good for us.
Yeah.
You know, at night we'd be tucked into bed, and then we'd open the window when mum and dad goes back downstairs. We'd climb out the window, run along the roof, throw oranges at cars. You hear all this screeching going, you know, and we're like, oh, race back in the bed.
Little punks.
Lay in the bed.
Punks.
Mum would come up and look in the room, we'd be like this, sound asleep. And just little things like Uncle would come and visit, and then he'd be getting to hide and seek, and you go, where is he? And the hotels have got the big walls.
Yeah, yeah.
And next minute you're like, where is he? You know, where's our uncle? And next minute he's like Spider-Man. He's up on the walls. And then you have the cleaners, you know, we'd go around the different parts of the hotel. And then you know, the sleeping old alcoholic cleaner, and then me and Rob would just sit there in the mornings throwing things at him and
trying to wake him up.
Yeah, just those sort of things. But everything in the hotel life and
so
probably
was the hotel, was it just a pub, or did it have accommodation as well, or was it a mixture?
No, I think it was only. I think it did have some accommodation. I can't remember that part. Yes, it did actually down the other end because there was a central lounge room. So they had rooms, but they're very only like just pub-like rooms.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Rob and I had that whole life of just hanging around each other, and even at that stage, like we didn't see much mum and dad because I was working, but you know, Rob because he was very young, and he'd always be holding me shirt, and Rob probably didn't talk for like, I reckon, nearly a year or two. Like,
still doesn't talk a lot now, really.
No, he doesn't. He observes a lot now, but that's where the closeness was back then. He would be hanging on me shirt. I'd be the one out the front doing all the talking for both of us.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you know, the hotel life sort of gathered into that sort of lifestyle.
It's a hard life, you know. A lot of people think it's a dream, but as I said, it can be challenging, and your time is not your own, and then there's kids, you know, you guys obviously missed out a bit of time, you're always trying to do your best for your kids, and I'm 100%. Sure that would have been in their mind to go, you know, we'll work hard, we'll get these pubs going, and we'll have a good,
and that's what they always said, you know, we want to try and start businesses and get this successful pubs for you guys to take over in years to come, and that was the whole plan back then, and so forth, and then
so and as you got older, that you continued working or moving and being in pubs and working in pubs, and then you got involved in working in the pubs, DJing and stuff.
Oh, mate, that's a whole different story of that. But it was more the pubs in regards to that lifestyle was good in that way. But obviously the stuff that I personally dealt with a guy who was supposedly our babysitter, and he was he was just the all around dude who mum and dad befriend back then. Yeah. And then, you know, then I just went through that stages of, where there were stages where I knew things were starting to happen, which I couldn't understand at that time because I was only young. Yeah. And once they started I was getting that stage, and what killed me the most is when I knew that things was going to happen, I would really hate on Rob, because I knew what I was just about to go through, and the fear I was fearing in myself, and I'd always tell Rob, "Get out of the room, go back. I hate you," because I knew Rob would cry, and I knew he'd go out of the room, and I knew this guy who was our so-called friend, babysitter, whatever you like to call him, would start his little, you know, things that happen over time, and it was very confusing back then too, because when you're young, you think, oh, fuck, you know, is this supposed to be happening? Yeah. And you don't know who to turn to because you think, oh fuck this, he's someone who I know.
Yeah.
And then he started to do certain things, and then I really at that stage I really confused, probably more about me as I grew up, more about me sexuality.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, fuck, if that happened from him, is it guys that I actually am attracted to because this has happened to me, or is it women that I like?
Yeah.
So I growing up through that part and then dealing with that and those circumstances.
What ages were around?
Man, like I was born in 73, so these are like probably 78, 79 when I was dealing with it.
So about 5, 6 years old.
I think it's
that's young
six
to
or
be,
so,
yeah.
and I was just, and because I didn't really know at that stage what it was, I was just like, I can't even really, because I've blacked it out that much, I can't even really go back to what I was even feeling that stage. I just knew my mindset, how I had to go, fuck, this isn't normal, or is this normal? Yeah. That was the question I was always asking myself, even going past that point of, do I like men or do I like women?
That's a big thing for such a young kid to have to process. And then like that sort of behaviour with that person, did that extend for years? Was it a short-term thing? Like, that's obviously something that is, it's a defining moment in your life, especially as you get older and you look back on stuff and you're like, well, how do I process this?
Yeah.
Knowing you as much as I've known you, you're not a victim.
No, and that's probably growing up, because there was a point where I probably felt like a victim, or I didn't.
To be honest, you don't have that victim mentality.
Yeah,
Let me be clear on that. Like, you obviously going through something like that, of course you are, but it's not something that you've used as a crutch to go down and be self-pitying or then seek any sort of anything from anyone. You've dealt with it yourself, which is something that, knowing how you are now, is a big thing. It's a huge thing. And
people sort of deal with things in different ways, and I felt getting through that, because I probably spent so much of the time when it was happening to me that I was that fucking confused. I didn't really know which way to go or what to say or what to do.
I didn't process it.
And that's the word. Probably processing was just like, wow. All I could just really think of is, am I attracted to men or women? As I was sort of looking at different things
older.
As I grew.
Yeah, as you get older.
And once we left that hotel scene, and I sort of. And there's certain things. Once we left that hotel, we actually moved hotels from Islington and Newcastle, and went to Mathara, which is like on the Victorian border in between Echuca and Lillington. So then that was like a whole new life fucking opened up, and I was like, wow, like now.
So you didn't have to deal with that person or that situation.
Not at that time, because I was like, wow, I'm fucking free of whatever that was feeling. And sometimes it was like a fucking vomiting stage. I was like, fuck, this is. Yeah. And mum and dad, obviously, them working as hard as they can. And I, at that fucking age, you don't know how to tell what was going on, because you don't even know what was going on.
Yeah. Were your parents ever made aware of what had happened to you in those early years? So you've never divulged that? They don't know? They
know now. Yeah. Like, they knew after, when we were all in the Sunshine Coast, and then there was one time just out of the blue, mum mentioned the person's name. And at that point I was just like, fuck that piece of shit, And then they're like, why? What's wrong with so-and-so? And then I got into detail. I had the sort of courage, I suppose, and I really needed to say something, I suppose you could say. And I told him sort of in some sort of way that what he had done. And obviously it was more getting that off my chest. Yeah. Rather than.
What was their reaction to that?
Oh, they were fucking shock. Devastated. Yeah. Dad was devastated. Mum was devastated because at the end of the day, they were doing their best to try and make business and a successful life for me and Rob. Yeah. And like anyone who's dealt with abuse, it's just, when you find out, sometimes it's too late, but it's just a thing you got to fucking deal with. Yeah. And that's, at that point, I'd been dealing with it for so long.
Yeah. You deal with it on your own, no?
I do. I had gone to a couple of like shrinks just to really sit and talk
I
and
think
try.
counsellor is the correct terminology.
Shrinks, counsellor. Yeah, sorry. So I went to a couple of those because I just. How I was thinking in my head, I was like, fuck, I just need, and a lot of people would say, oh, I went to a counsellor and they helped. And I was like, well, I've got to go and just, I just rocked up to really any counsellor at that point. I didn't really know what even fucking was going on when I did go there. But it was a couple of times and really sort of dug into really a few things that really, hit home for me. And I've sort of over the years, living in that hotel, I thought everything was good, and then fucking old bud,
and then it wasn't.
Old bud turns up again to the next hotel.
Oh shit!
So I was like, "Fuck, what's going on here?" Because obviously he was good friends of mum and dad.
Yeah, so he sort of found his spot in your family.
And
just sort of infiltrated himself to be in somewhat of a normal situation that your folks would have known, but for you it would have been horrific.
It was. I was that fucking more confused because I'm thinking,
why is this bloke?
Fuck, what's he doing back again? And luckily, the memories of that hotel, there wasn't anything happening there because I think it was only a short time or something happened because we got sent away to our grandmother's. Mum and dad finally took a holiday, and then he took over the hotel for me mum and dad.
Yeah.
And then I'm not quite sure how many weeks it was or a month or something. I'm not quite sure. But when we got back, he'd run the fucking hotel into the ground for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So then mum and dad was like, fuck, what do we do? Where, they lost a great deal of money and obviously pride and everything else that goes with it. But then we all shipped and went to Tamworth.
Yeah.
And that's where we live with my mother's mother. And that was, again, a new fucking start, a new town.
Well, you guys have been, I suppose in the time I've known you, you move around and you travel and it's a very fluid for you guys to just, and I think it's brave that you can just go and relocate and start. It's a big thing, especially when as you get older, it gets harder to do as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, man, you got some balls just doing that, So, but I can see now looking at that was your normality. That was your norm. So it's like, that's what you do.
We never had friends for long because we're in probably hotels for 3 years at a time.
Yeah.
Then we're off to another town.
Yeah.
But then when we finally stopped and it was Tamworth, and that's part of our growing up was Tamworth. When we were younger, we got there in I think 83. And then that was like, okay, we're here for a few years now. So then it was more dealing with that, going through my head and then relocating, not knowing what the real reason why we moved or fucking we're going to make new friends again. And
you just did it.
And then once I started school, obviously red hair and freckles, I'm not the fucking most popular dude in school. So then I can relate. Then the bullying started, like the flogging started in primary. I did meet a person who could fight in primary.
Yeah.
And then I sort of hung around him for a little bit and then he left and then it was just, and back in those days, because I had so much fear of violence, probably because I was watching it in the pubs or I just hated fighting. It really gave me anxiety. So even when guys in the playground would go, redheaded, freckly, whatever, be out the front, we'll fight out the front after school, and me being me, like, make sure you're out the front. I'm going to be out there. Knowing mum's out the back picking me up. Like I went out the back, I jumped in the car and mum drove around the front and I could just see this massive crowd building. Yeah. And I'm thinking, fuck, my heart was pumping because I'm thinking that was supposed to be me.
Yeah, you were supposed to be a part of that.
Get a flogging. So I got out of it that day.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, tomorrow's a new day. Now I've got to try and get through that. And that was more, and high school never changed. Once I got to high school, it was still the same. I'd get the old, when I did have head flushed down the toilet.
Jesus, yeah.
And then kicked as I was coming out of the bathrooms or whatever.
So you were obviously, you weren't a big kid as in size wise. So
I was probably back then. I was probably about 65 to 69 kilos. Like I was thin.
Yeah.
But I was to show I'm not backing down, even though I was scared as shit for fighting.
Yeah.
And getting bullied. I'm not saying I was a saint. I probably was a cheeky bastard as well.
Yeah.
But then when obviously the bullying started even worse and I was like, fuck, I've got to get to a stage where I've got to do something. I've got to do something. And I come across a friend who was doing Kyokushin karate.
Yep.
And that was in Tamworth. And I thought, he said, come along and train. So I was like, fuck, what's Kyokushin karate? Never heard of it before.
Yeah.
So I went along to that gym. In town, where there's only rugby league or fighting. That was really the only things in a little country town that you done.
Yep.
If you've done it well, you're like this little town celebrity because there's no one else around.
A big hello to John Halford as well.
Yeah. Well, that's who originally got me into the Kyokushin because he sort of come along, and then Mark Tyson back then he was the one who was coaching Kyokushin, and we're doing boxing, kickboxing, and all sorts of stuff, and then
and that's really our I suppose relationship with each other comes from that. The Kyokushin is in the martial arts, it's a universal sort of brotherhood, and it finds us here today from those many years ago of training together and stuff. Yeah. So I want to just drill down a little bit more because you've suffered a hard childhood in nothing was it was a tough gig. It was a tough gig, going through what you've spoken about, and you had to survive that. So if someone's listening to this now and they're having a hard time and they're in their younger years, what's your advice to them to help them get through and come through the other side of the challenges they may be facing now?
It is to seek someone you can actually talk to, and counsellors. They're professional, but they've dealt with a lot of kids and a lot of teenagers who have gone through probably sexual abuse or abuse in general. So, and really talking about it's an ongoing thing for me. Like ever since I can remember, talking about things helps me get over it.
Yes, I think I'm the same with that too.
Because as I said, in my head each day, even though people see me at the age of 49 now. Yeah. But it's torture. Sometimes it's torture in my head each day, and I'm not saying it goes for the whole 24 hours, but there might be half an hour a day where it's torture because I'll think of something which will upset me.
Yeah, it takes you back. Yeah.
And then I'll whether I get a bit of anxiety or I'll think, fuck it. But I've learnt over the time of talking to people who I can trust about it.
Yeah.
And knowing the mechanisms to use. And for me, as soon as that feeling starts, I've got to stop and I've got to go outside and get some fresh air because I know it's like an anxiety coming on. Yeah. So going outside, walking in fresh air and getting to look around at different things.
Yeah, just take your mind off it. I think, and this is probably a conversation for us for another time, but I can certainly relate to that. And I think, myself also, in past years have had, some challenges, and talking to counsellors, it's funny because whether it's a counsellor dealing with young things or a relationship counsellor or whatever it would be, the one common theme I find with them is they just ask you a question to get you talking.
That's right.
They don't. I've had counselling sessions where I've walked out and I've gone, give me no advice at all. I just ended up speaking for fucking an hour.
Right, that's right.
It's like, but I think that there lies in what you've just said, just talking to someone, getting it out, maybe having someone with a bit of empathy and better still, someone that can probably give you a strategy, just like the strategy that you've said now.
Yeah.
Get out, change your environment.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing if you have anxiety, and I've suffered from that myself in the past, and I'd be asleep. So it wasn't a conscious anxiety, it was a subconscious one. I'd be asleep, I'd wake up having a panic attack, and I'd have to just get up in my jocks and basically head straight out into my backyard, just stand there in the fresh air and just feel that I'm able to breathe and get my breathing under control and stuff. So it can be very debilitating, and you got to find, you've got to find your strategy, I think, that will enable you then to deal with it and get you through.
Yeah.
And I suppose, if I can indulge for one moment, something that was said to me was, when you're having a panic attack or you get anxiety, don't fight it, embrace it. You're going to, the thing is, you think you're going to die, you think you're going to have a heart attack, you can't breathe. But in reality, that's not the case.
No.
It's a psychosomatic thing that stresses your body. Yep. So when you embrace it and you sort of challenge and you feel, okay, it's my old friend, he's coming back 100%. For another crack. And
that's how you got to look at it.
Let's do it, and you go out and you go, okay, I'm going to control my breathing and just, we're going to get through this. It may take me a minute or 5, but I'll get through it and I can see the other side. I think once you realise that you can face it and get through it, it's a very, very powerful and empowering thing. Yeah,
and it's only just the breathing for me. Like if I go outside and it's fresh air breathing, it's really deep breaths for me. That's how I know when it's coming on. Then I go, that's my maintenance thing. That's what I've got to go and do is breathe, because when it all started really coming about is, I'd be on the phone to Mum crying, going, Mum, what the fuck what am I going through? What's going through? And Mum herself went through anxiety. She goes, darling, it's only anxiety. What you got to do is just take big breaths and try and think of some nice things, because obviously, she went through it as well. But I just found my mechanism was as soon as I started feeling that, as you say, that warm feeling, that dark cloud that's just over you, and you go,
it sort of just compresses your body, man.
Fucking feel like you can't breathe, and you're like, I've got to go outside and I've got to take big breaths and I've got to walk. Yeah. And by the time I finished the walk, it could have been 500 meters, could be a kilometer, but as soon as I finished that walk and I've breathed and I've sort of tired myself out a little bit, that's what helped me then go, right, fuck, now I can move on a bit.
This is, when you don't know what anxiety is or why it's happening to you, that's the craziest thing. I had it, and I'm a big one in trying to understand any situation, and that was a situation I couldn't control and didn't understand. So I looked at it, and I'll throw a name at you. You're probably too young. You remember a actor or a guy called Norman Gunston? Norman Gunston / Gary McDonald was his name.
People call me him when I wear my bucket hat. They go, look, you look like.
I'll tell you a little known fact about him. You know why he disappeared off TV and theatre? Because of anxiety.
Oh, okay,
He, out of nowhere, he started to get anxiety every time he had to perform.
Yep.
And he couldn't deal with it. Yep. And that was basically from what I've read back in the day. Yep. That was really such a debilitating thing that it ended one of the Aussie icon, comedians back in the day. He was iconic, man, when I was 100%. A kid. So, and it just, his life changed, and if, for I suppose for more recent, Mother and Son was a TV show he did on the ABC, and he was just such a legend back then. And I'm like, man, this guy, I remember my parents watching him on TV. It was like, he was everywhere, and it's like, and it affected him. And then, he was sort of he paved the way to a lot of people realizing what anxiety and panic attacks are all about. That's right. And that was really, for me, then it was like, okay, right. Well, he didn't die, because it feels like you can't breathe. It feels like you're having a heart attack. It feels like your lungs are being compressed, which is, I think that's our similarity. Yep. Your lungs get compressed, so you're like, I've got to get out in the air and fill my lungs.
It's a crazy feeling, a crazy thing when it comes about. And I feel for the people who, they can't deal with it or don't know where to turn with it. And I was lucky because I had obviously mum and dad who were very loving, and my brother who I love and adore all the time as well. But it was just some of those little journeys you got to go on your own, and you got to know where to turn, because if you don't know that part, you could have the best family life at home, but it's a fucking it's a torture chamber to try and then get in the maze that it was. Too. So that's when I got introduced to martial arts at that stage. That's when I thought, but in saying that, when I started martial arts, it was more to, stop the bullying.
Stop the bullying, yep.
But then over the years of participating in and being a fighter and then changing the coaching, I always look back and I thought to myself, and I've done so many sort of like talks with youth and all that, I really feel that it wasn't actually, stop the bullying or putting another face on another opponent so I could legally hurt that person to get my aggression out.
Yep.
I think it was more to show people my masculinity that I thought a man had to be.
Yes.
I'm a fighter. People are going to look at me at a man.
You're tough. Yeah, you're tough, dude. Yeah.
Because that's happened to me with another man as a kid, and I've had to go through some things that dude put me through.
Yeah.
Fuck, this is like a hiding wall that I can hide behind and show that Rich Fogarty's he's tough, he's a fighter. But deep down, I hated fighting. I only done it so I could actually learn self-defense and learn how to protect myself from bullying.
From what you'd been
But
through.
On the other side was to go, I've got to show people my masculinity that I felt that I lost as a kid. And now, because of my street smarts and my aggression, my skill, I started winning fights.
Yeah.
And then it became an addiction. Oh, I'm winning. I want to keep going now.
Yeah.
So then it's all like a double-edged sword. You start to win all the time, and then you go out partying, and it's all
it's a drug,
anxiety. It's like this whole wheel that turns.
And you've done it all though. Like for the people listening, Kyokushin karate is known as the strongest karate, and we've both done it. You're talking full contact, bare knuckle, all out. The only thing you can't do is punch to the face, because obviously that's just a bit barbaric. But you can knee to the head, you can kick to the head. Yeah.
That's probably what appealed to me.
It's such a you have to if you and I think, again, we share this commonality in that I thought I was weak, and that will just test you. And then when you feel like that guy just punched me flat out, I'm still here. He's kicked me as hard as I can. I'm still here. Man, I can walk through walls.
Yep.
And then you get this confidence that just elevates you to the next level.
Yep.
And it's just quite addictive, which, as you said, and then obviously you had a good, you had a good competitive career as well in the Kyokushin and the kickboxing and the Muay Thai.
Yep.
So, that's something that I think a lot of fighters, it's something that's really hard to replace as you get older. Yeah. You're like, man, you got this euphoric feeling of fighting and winning. People will, until you've done a walk out to the ring with everyone cheering like the Roman Colosseum days. Oh, man, it's something that very few people will experience in reality. Yeah. And that's why there's all the corporate fighter things and all that these days, because people want to have that 100%. Feeling. But
you can be in a crowd of 20,000. Yeah. Or a crowd of 300 and still have this exactly the same thing. The same as when I say to people, how did you deal with your abuse or whatever? I say, my anxiety and my torture chamber that happens in my head, it doesn't matter whether I've gone through that abuse or you've grown up in your childhood wetting the bed.
Yeah.
It will all come to the same point.
It's all childhood trauma.
It's the trauma that sort of just little things trigger it.
Yeah.
And bring it up. And that's the thing that really, once I started fighting and I loved it, it was more, I'm not quite sure how to describe it for the listeners, but the more that I was getting hurt from Kyokushin karate, the bruising, the ribs, the knuckles on the chest, the leg kicks, corking me legs, it was like, I don't know what the word is, like a sensation that I was getting addicted to because the pain was taking away a lot of my other shit.
Yeah.
Like the thoughts, I could just focus on, fuck, my leg's stinging from leg kicks.
That's a very real.
But I feel strong, that's what,
well, I've had the same, like I went through the same thing where I'd get bruised and battered. And I look back and I'm a big analyzer with things, as well. And I'm like, and now coaching kids, and over the years, I've done it for 25 plus years. Sometimes I get kids come in and I look at their arms and they've got the cuts, so they cut themselves. And the self-harming thing, I look back at, and maybe you'll relate to this. To me, I was numb to feeling anything. Yep. And when I had the feeling of going to training and I was getting pummeled, it made me feel alive because I was actually for the first time in my life feeling something.
That's right.
And so you go there and you're like, man, look at this black belt. He's going to punch the crap out of me, but come on, bring it on. 100%. And then you get through the challenge of facing your fears and someone that is obviously a lot better than you. Yep. And you're like, well, I survived that and I'm a bit hurt, but geez, I fucking feel great, Maybe I look like shit and I probably did because I was a terrible student, but, I think that's in essence what you're saying.
Yeah, that's...
As long as whether it's pain or a good feeling or a bad feeling, when you've been traumatized, you just want to feel something,
I think that's what it was. I was instead of feeling numb a lot of the time,
something.
Yeah. And even, as I say, like even a lot of relationships with women have been, over the years, has been really numb.
Yeah.
Like there's been just soulless for me.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason it is, but it's just that when you feel something, and the fighting was the part of where I'm going, man, I'm getting towed up, or that's hurting me, but I love that feeling. It was like more of a, I don't know whether you could call it a fetish, because you're getting kicked and punched and you're actually loving the feeling of it.
Yeah.
So that's why I continued in fighting for so long.
Mind you, as a coach, you got to have that. You got to, if you get in the ring and you're fearful of getting hit, don't get in the ring.
No,
and a lot of people they love the fantasy of being a fighter, and they want to be the Instagram with the gloves on and the cage and fucking all that. But you know what? Careful what you wish for, because someone's going to just punch the crap out of you. And I say this to guys now because that I train, and as we both do. If you're not going to get in there and you're not prepared to just punch the fuck out of whoever's in front of you,
100%.
You better not get in there, because if you square up against someone with my attitude, I won most of my fights because the guys that I was fighting just got tired of hitting me. I'd see them break. They'd throw everything at me, and then they'd go, "Fuck, this guy's still there." And I'm like, "Now it's my turn,
now
man.
It's my turn. I'm just going to keep coming." Yeah, but that's probably the mentality I had in fighting as well.
Yeah.
Like as much as I was in, even you can sort of talk to my father and my brother before fights, man, no one could talk to me. I was in a
Really?
anxiety zoned out.
So you used to get anxious? I think
bad.
yeah.
I couldn't talk. Like even though I wanted to talk, I literally could not talk.
That's big, bro. That's big.
I could not talk,
Yeah.
and I had just non-stop tingly feelings all over the body, and my mind was just going crazy because I knew I didn't like fighting. I knew I hated it. But
you did it anyway.
I'd do it. I just got in there because I knew once I got through the ropes, then I forget everything because it's survival now. That's my mentality when I was fighting.
Yeah.
That's why I would say I was never a great fighter. I didn't lose too many fights, but like to go that, like the Wayne Parrs, the Nathan Corbett's who dedicated their lives to be the greatest champions of all champions.
Yep.
I never had that. I didn't want it.
Yeah.
I was happy, one, to show me masculinity, two, to get hurt and hit and survive.
Face that challenge.
And get in there and do me 3 minutes, be known as a fighter. Yeah, wow, I love this. That getting hurt was my little buzz. I got hurt and I got leg kicked. That was my trauma, getting over it, and I can move forward.
Yeah.
And some of the accolades that I won, state titles or Kyokushin, kickboxing, whatever. I'm the champ. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
But before the fight, I was zoned out, bro. Like even the old man used to come up and say, "Oh, how you feeling, mate?" Don't fucking talk to me.
Don't talk.
I don't want to talk. Even Rob, because he fought a little bit after me. Like he started fighting when I was sort of getting into it.
Yeah.
And he'd come, "Hey, bro," he was in my corner all the time, and they'd say, encourage, "Come on, bro, you fucking got this." But my headspace, I didn't even fucking care. I didn't even want to be there. I was just like,
that's big, bro.
As soon as I walk out. And I don't really see anything else. But as soon as I get into the ring, whoever they've put me against, that's when I've just got to fight. I've just got to turn on and fight.
You just put yourself under such extreme pressure that going on what you said, you probably didn't even want to do it, but you just did it because it was part of the process, mate.
I didn't because that was the process I was feeling from all what I'd endured as a young kid.
Yeah.
To go, you can, because I'm very good over the years of switching my mindset.
Yep.
And I mean with everything. It doesn't matter whether it's a relationship, whether it's friends.
Switching it as in on off or
on off,
all
on
in,
off.
all out. That type of mentality.
On off.
Yeah.
So if I had a friend, or even if I had a girlfriend, or started to see someone and they started to not give me anything back.
Yeah.
I'm easy, even if they're emotionally invested, I can easily just go, boom, I'm done. See you later.
Something's triggered you and that's it, you're
boom.
out. Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's someone as a friend goes, Rich, and then I can just go, boom, I don't even talk to that dude anymore.
I'll ask you this, you reckon it's something you should work on though? Like
100%.
It's just something that you go, I do go off things. And again, man, we're just talking, and this 100%. Is not pre-scripted by any stretch guys listening. So, but I can absolutely relate to that where I'm the same one. Push me to a point till I turn the switch off and then fucking whatever you do ain't going to matter anymore.
That's my downfall too.
But I think it's something that you sort of got to have a bit of give and take,
And at 49, I'm starting to learn that now. I've got someone who I'm chatting to and they're amazing person, and it's starting to help me get through some of the things I thought I was just happy to just turn off and on all the time. Yeah. But in saying that, when I did separate from my from the ex,
so that we'll just again, we know, but you've been married, you got a couple of kids, 17 and
19 years old, sort of married and been in a relationship for, and had two beautiful kids, Jet and Dakota, and once that sort of separation happened, that was a big thing where, and I can say when it happened, I knew I had a feeling it was happening. Yeah. So it was easy enough to go boom down because they were obviously the family moved to Tamworth and I was moving to Newcastle with Rob.
But you lived on the sunny coast when you went
Sunshine
through
Coast for 17 years.
Separation.
Through the separation.
So your kids grew up on the Sunshine Coast.
Yep.
It was like your home, it was very comfortable. You had your very successful pool building businesses. So, this is something that a lot of the listeners won't know. You've been successful in your own right not only in the martial arts and in the coaching area, but also in the real world, in the, as in having a very successful, business that was turning over, millions of dollars in the pool building game on the Sunshine Coast, and things were going all right, but then the split happened with your missus, and again, it goes back to your childhood where your life pretty much gets put on its head. You got to move, you got to relocate, you got to find a new life, and then you're doing it, not only without your ex-wife, but then you're going to miss your kids and that too. Yeah. So you got to have that whole separation. That was the big thing when I left the Sunshine Coast, and I knew my headspace wasn't in it. Yeah.
And I just signed the whole business over to the partner that I had.
Yeah.
And the wife and kids went back to town to the family. I honestly, for the first time in my life, I jumped on a plane the next day and went to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Kyle Noak, who's a close friend of mine, and Cowboy Cerrone. I stayed at Cowboy Cerrone's ranch for about, I think, 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
It was the first time in my adult life I had no income, no family, no job, no address.
No commitments.
No commitments. Yeah. And to be honest, for that short time, it was a massive weight off my shoulder in regards to getting to know myself again, what's going on.
Yeah.
And then obviously my brother moved to Newcastle from Sunshine Coast. Yeah. So as soon as I flew in from Albuquerque, I was, 2015, I think it was, I moved straight to Newcastle.
Yeah.
But the kids who are my pride and joy were in Tamworth. So that's like a 3-hour drive.
Yeah.
But then the switch of my mindset, I had the opportunity where I could go work in my brother's gym in Newcastle. I got a car and petrol, and I had a good friend, Michael Maisie, who I respect and I will always respect for what he done for me and my family. He was in town with living. I would leave Newcastle on a Friday afternoon. This happened for 12 months, every single weekend. Yep. So I got to a point where I wanted to put my life on hold because I wanted to show my children how dedicated I want to be to them. I don't want them to know that I'm going to be there for them, and I don't want another man raising my kids.
Yeah.
So every Friday I would drive out of Newcastle, and Michael was working in the mines. He'd give me his key to his house, and I'd stay at his house for 2 nights, Friday, Saturday nights, and drive back Sundays to Newcastle. So every weekend the kids knew Friday, Saturdays,
clockwork,
Dad's there.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to instill in them.
Yeah.
Because of probably what, me going through certain things, I needed them to know is
there's a regularity. Well, there's a comfort in knowing that's not changing. I mean, I've been through the same thing with marriage separation. Although my daughter was 4 when I separated from my ex, and I remember speaking to a guy, and he was at the gym, one of the guys at the gym I used to train at the martial art gym, and he had 2 daughters he was really close to, but again, separated. So this is probably something out there for all the dads that are going through
100%.
what we've been through with the separation. And I go, man, how do you keep, how are you tight with your because that was my fear in splitting up. I didn't care about splitting up. I didn't want to be with a woman anymore.
No,
Get out of my life,
right.
next. Yep. But the one thing that hurt, and I know it's in your heart too, is the separation that's forced upon you, that you don't see your kids.
That's right.
And the one thing that this guy said to me, that I'll take it to the bank, and you've just said there's something similar. He goes, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you're doing, like he was a traveling salesman, he goes, the same time every day, I pick up my phone and I speak to my kids.
Yep.
And you go through the bullshit where the mum's saying, "Hey, fucking no, I'm not going to put them on the phone," or they're too young to talk to on the phone.
Right,
But if they're too young to talk to on the phone, well, then they probably won't remember that you
100%.
But when they start to correlate that contact, that regular contact, and I've done the same thing, or I did the same thing, got on the phone. I'd be in Thailand training. I'd be overseas, with fighters or whatever it might be, on business or whatever when I was in corporate. Like, what's the time back in Melbourne? It's this time. Should be getting home from school. And sometimes you make all this effort to ring them, or you'd probably make all the effort to travel. Then you go, "Hey, how you doing? Whatever." Yeah, not much. And I'm like, right. Yeah. You're just like, well listen, but the thing is, it's just that. And as I said, for the dads that are going through it, just keep the contact, no matter how small. But it's got to be keep it consistent. And sometimes it won't be substantial, but it'll be just enough to know the kids will just take that away.
And I feel for the dads out there that haven't got that opportunity and not by their own wrongdoing either. Like some obviously are shit dads, but there's some great dads out there that haven't had the opportunity to actually be in their kids' lives, and they're the dads I really feel for, because I knew when I was in that circumstance, there was no way in hell that I was going to let my children down by not travelling to there. And mind you, every time I'd be driving home on a Sunday afternoon and dropping the kids back to the ex's place and driving back to Newcastle, fuck, I would be in tears. Just knowing how much of a good time that we had on Friday, Saturday night, but just leaving my children, that really got to me. But that only went on for 12 months. And then obviously, certain things changed, and the ex-wife went back to Sunshine Coast, and I got the opportunity through my children. They wanted to come and test what living with dad's like.
Yeah, that's great.
So that was God's way of rewarding me for all the hard work that I was trying to instill in my kids.
You put in. If you didn't, if you didn't make that effort for that 12 months,
that's right.
There's no way your kids are going to try and live with dad, because you didn't put in.
No, that's
and it's
right.
like everything in life, fucking people want shit now without doing anything.
Yeah.
What you put in is what you get out.
Yeah.
My staff in my business go, I want more hours. Well, I go, well, do more. You want more, do more. You don't do more, you're not going to get more.
Kids in that way, I knew if I put in the time and effort and just showed them I want to be there.
That's fantastic.
And I think once that sort of whole discussion with all parties and the kids sort of put their head down, which, I felt bad that we put them in that position, but they both looked down and they both said, I want to go and live with dad. That to me was, and those 10 years that I've raised my son and daughter, Jet and Dakota.
Yeah.
Because I have, I've done the gym work, I've travelled, I've done all this fun stuff when I was in Newcastle, but that moments that I had, the three of us living together, me raising my children, really I'm content with life. And as people say, I don't care, I could fucking die tomorrow. I could if I died tomorrow, then so be it. I'd be happy that I've contributed to my children's life and they become beautiful adults. Yep. The only thing I would be sad about with death, really, at this stage in my life, is not seeing my daughter grow up and get married, my son grow up and get married. That's the only real sadness that I would feel.
Yep.
Outside of that, is my children are my life. They're everything to me,
And that's a very true statement. Both you and Rob, you've come from hard and challenging beginnings, because your folks try to do the right thing. But it's also when you know what you've been through, then you also know what you'll lay down for your children.
100%.
So if there's been things in your life, as in mine, that perhaps you didn't enjoy as a child, well, what you do is you don't duplicate that in your child's life. No. You try and do better.
That's right.
And that's the one thing where you see parents repeating behaviours of their parents, and then their kids repeat. Well, if you don't like the things that have gone on in your life, change it.
You've got to change it.
Don't fucking repeat the pattern.
And that's what I wanted to do with my kids is just go, you know what? Not that my mum and dad split up or anything. Obviously, like every parent, they have their blues, but I really wanted to make sure like my kids were everything. So I had to make sure that they understood that I will do anything in my grasp to make sure they are protected. And that's probably getting back to the stuff that happened as a young kid. I never wanted to be in that environment. And that's why it was so hard for me to go, another man won't raise you, because
absolutely.
I'm not having another fucking man raise you, because
what attitude will come to their life.
And I used to say to the other party, I said, I will take you through court. I will not be losing these children, because I will not have the same story, if any, happen to them when they're young.
You're a protector, brother, and that's admirable. Yeah,
that's what it basically got down to, and God worked His way. Thank God that He gave me the children to raise myself, and obviously all parties knew what sort of father I was in general. So
you're a hard worker, and these days
I wouldn't say that now, brother.
Well, not these days. I was just about to say not so much now, but no, you put in the hard yards. You're a good family man, and I suppose your kids are your legacy, and you've got a great legacy with these two, and the love's there, and that's what no amount of money, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have, I suppose, that happiness and that connection, and it's not going to matter. And I suppose that's something that if I look back and on my time as well, I'm like, yeah, I really focused on work. Maybe I should have done more.
Yep.
We always look back and you go, can you do more? Should you do more?
There's always that look on.
But all you can do is your best in any given situation.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's all I've tried to do throughout anything, whether I've had me fight career or went into coaching, Rob and me doing promotions, or more Rob's the guru at promotions. I'll just be there for if I'm needed. Moral support, clapping him.
But
hand out. I'll receive the money.
You're talking yourself down a bit because, one thing again that you've done a lot of, and you alluded to this with your training with Kyle Noak. What a champion human 100%. Being he is.
Very close.
And a trailblazer in the UFC for Australia too. So let's talk about that.
Yep.
And then Cowboy Cerrone, just a tough, tough guy. And a great money maker for the UFC. Mate. But you've been around these guys, and then we talk about Mark Hunt and Tai Tuivasa and the guys that you've been around. Now, it's okay to be around these people, and they'll go, it's one of the guys, but you've earned your stripes in results that you've got as working as part of their coaching team. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. So your most memorable moments in the teams that you've worked for, who would you say?
Well, definitely Mark Hunt, because definitely Mark Hunt's he's always been an icon figure to me, because he's done so much from nothing. Tai Tuivasa, he's just a larrikin. He's the one who sort of give me the name Filthy. So that's all. That's pretty much stuck with me forever now. But Mark Hunt and Tai Tuivasa being like an Australian fighters.
Should I ask how you got the name Filthy? Should we explain that?
Do you want to? Mate, honestly,
kids will be listening.
Honestly, this is Tai Tuivasa. He's the one who we sort of knew each other for a lot of years, but it was in New Zealand, and he was coming up the stairs, and I was doing striking with Ross Pearson at that time, and we were fighting Dan Hooker at that time, and Tai Tuivasa come up the stairs because he was with Mark Hunt's camp, and all he could hear was going, Filthy. And I looked and he was like, what are you doing here, Filthy? And I'm not quite sure whether he just called me that because he thinks I'm a filthy bastard or something.
Seen the inside of your car.
He's probably hung out with me and partied a lot, so we were in a filthy together. But I'm not quite sure. Australian-wise, Mark Hunt, Tai Tuivasa, they're the two guys who really hold a soft place in my heart, because take away the fighting, the coaching, and the martial arts.
Yeah.
Those two, and not a lot of people know, but those two generally care for people. They do. Yeah. If I asked him, Tai or Mark, to do something, without hesitations, no worries, Filthy, I'll be there. Don't worry about that. And all the time we're off the phone. Love you, brah. Love you.
Yeah.
They're just that close. For an Australian martial arts, those are my two favourite sort of people.
Yep.
Travelling, obviously Kyle Noak, I'm classing Kyle Noak in the American side of things because he was over there in Albuquerque for so long. But he was my sort of ticket to Jackson Winklejohn.
Yeah.
He was the one who was living there. He was the one who was training at Jackson's. And for out of the blue, I just messaged him and said, oh, man, I'd love to get in and come over there. And he was like, mate, Rich, 100%, jump in and come over. I was like, wow, that's crazy. But little did I know, because I was heavy in my faith at that time too. And John Jones was just starting off, and he had the Philippians, 413 on his chest, and a lot of that resonated with me and my faith. And I was like, oh, I'd love to meet that dude one day. And then I went to Albuquerque and trained with Kyle. And then next minute he's like, oh, we're going to Church of Bones. And to me, that was like a wow factor, I was like, wow, I got me opportunity to tell Bones a bit of my story growing up, and we confide in each other in a lot of little personal things, me and Bones, which, he's done some crazy things, but as a person, I still respect him and like him as a person. And then there was the Cowboy Cerrones, the Overeems, the Holly Holmes, the Michelle Watersons. You walk into Jackson's and you got St. Pierre and Rashad Evans and Travis Brown. And you're like, from me, because I was just watching the UFC just starting off.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
there's some big
holy
names there,
shit.
Big names.
And they're like, hey, coach, these people who are on the TV at that stage, and I'd only just started coaching, these guys were coming up to me going,
giving you respect,
hey, coach, you're Kyle's friend, mate. Glad to have you in Albuquerque. I'd love to do some pads with you. at that stage I loved doing pads with everyone. So I was just like Overeem, doing pads with Overeem, doing pads with Cowboy, doing pads with, Michelle Waterson and Kyle and whoever else I can get me in. Diego Sanchez, me and him become very close friends, and I travelled a little bit with him to Nashville and stuff.
Diego Sanchez religious too?
He was very, but again, it's sort of he went through his stages. He was very into he brought me into the church in Albuquerque as well.
Yeah.
He was there's a few close friends I still have to today, Derek Wick and all that, who have churches in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And then he sort of went on his way of the universe stuff, and then he went to different faiths and that, and he had some trouble with the coach that he had personally with the UFC, and it was just all this whole thing that was like a whole.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
It's a lot, but you got to admire the guy because he was the number one, season one Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, he was one of those
and
characters
he was still,
that made it.
And he was still fighting in the UFC nearly 20 years, 25 years later.
Yeah.
And
so it's pretty surreal, even as you're sitting there just recounting those names, it's pretty surreal when you look back and you go, oh yeah, I did that. When you think about it, if you would have spoken to yourself when you started doing, Kyokushin or the Thai boxing or kickboxing, you go, I'm going to be training, with the most elite fighters in the world one day and holding pads for them.
Yeah.
It's a bit crazy to see the journey. Yeah. And I suppose in life, when challenges are thrown at you, you often look at all the negativity, but you can sometimes, without even realising, be blessed with some great opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's just wanting to be and thriving to try and be around real people.
Yeah.
That's when you're around real people and genuine people, you get on a good journey, a positive journey.
Yeah.
If you're around shitbags and they're not so good at people, you really live that shitbag life.
Yeah.
So the positive thing for me with MMA was here I am in Jackson as just a nobody from the Sunshine Coast, holding pads and learning my craft even more from the Jackson Winklejohn.
Yeah.
But then also Rob training under Jeff Fennick for 10 years for the boxing side of things. Yep. And next minute we're having dinner at Muhammad Ali's place in 2008 in his house.
Yeah.
Lennox Lewis walks in and we're all sitting around the table having lunch before we went to the Kentucky Derby races. And you pinch yourself and go, Muhammad Ali, like fucking, I remember my old man used to just rave on about Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, here I am in Muhammad Ali's house with his wife, his sisters and everything, Lennox Lewis.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow. That was probably the pinnacle part of my combat life to meet someone with his greatness.
Yes.
But
I mean, he's iconic as a human being, never mind as a sportsman and an athlete. He
done what he wanted to do
on the world.
100%.
Generally, fight fans, no fight fans, you know that name.
But then you get caught up in with Jeff and Rob, and next minute I'm sitting at Mike's, having lunch and at Planet Hollywood, having lunch with Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I remember I was in the limo when Mike Tyson.
I think that's a bit of an inside joke. I think
folks,
that's Rob and your story. I didn't go on that trip, but being in Mike Tyson's house, and I can relate to the surreal feeling. You go, man, am I fucking here? Am I dreaming, or is this real? And then you go, no, it's real. Mike's talking to you. Mike's going, hey, Rich, what's going on? Hey, Rob. And you're like, wow, this is crazy. And then that's the years following that through Jeff Fennick.
Yeah.
Times were crazy through LA and Vegas because we hung out with the likes of Warney and Liz Hurley, parties. And then they'd say, oh, Mick Doohan's coming in town. We're going out to the Cat House or whatever it was, nightclub.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's so many sort of celebrity pinching that we used to hang out with just on the friendship level.
Yeah.
And probably where I got most of my connections through life.
Yeah.
And doing the story sort of thing was, this is Jeff opened a lot of doors for Rob and I in regards to that.
Jeff's obviously a mutual friend of ours, and I respect the guy, and he's done nothing but good stuff.
100%.
Towards me, and obviously to you and Rob even more so because Rob and Jeff are real tight as well.
Really
so
tight,
it's the combat sports, and it's a big world, but I think. You got some real people there and Mark Hunt, we go back to Mark, he did a seminar at my gym when I opened the first Hammers gym.
Yep.
And I remember inviting him down and when he was on the Hammer Time fight show, and he goes, I'll do a seminar. And I remember, trying to pay him for it after. And he goes, "No, man." He goes, "I don't want your money." He goes, "What you've done for the fight sports and for me," he goes, "You keep it."
100%.
You know, and I was like, no one has ever done that.
No,
like, you know, and it was, you know, in all good faith, he did something. He did a seminar, and I appreciated it. And he needs to be rewarded for you know, his time.
But that's a
and
type
he just
of dude that
didn't bat an eyelid. Wouldn't have none of it. And I'm like, there's not many times in your life where you meet someone and you do a bit. That was a business transaction initially to do the seminar, and they're like, "This is the deal. There's about no problem."
Yep.
And then at the end they go, "No, I remember you did that many years ago.
That's right.
I haven't forgotten, and this is my appreciation." And that's such a rarity in this world now, because there's a lot of takers and not too many givers. You know,
Mark's been through all that with his career. There's been a lot of takers, and you know, he's done things which he knows personally for me.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping I've done through our time in COVID when we hung out for like 10 months in Newcastle that I actually personally impacted him in somehow, because I class him more, not even as a friend, more of a real brother.
Yeah.
You know, we're the same age. We always have the same jokes of the age. I've been retired because I hated fighting. He's still going at nearly 50, and you got to admire the guy and what his story is.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I take my hat off to him, and he's always got my time whenever he wants it, because I love the dude, man.
Yeah, he's a genuine person that you know, has no airs and graces about him.
No.
And he's been the same. I remember he's you know, obviously fighting for Lolo and that in New Zealand, and the early days of K1 and fighting on the Tarek Solik.
Yeah.
Bloke's the same bloke,
Hasn't changed.
same guy, gets in, doesn't overrate himself, doesn't underrate himself.
No.
He just knows when you just know when he's going to fight. It's going to be entertaining, and you know, we all greatly appreciate and respect that.
100%.
But you know, so going back and having such a great connection with you know, an icon of the fight game in Australia and indeed the world. Again, it's a big thing. And if I got to say, so best coaching moments. Worst coaching moments. What would you, if I had to say, what is your best coaching moment?
Best coaching moment, I would say, is being asked by Mark Hunt to coach him and be a part of the coaching team for his boxing fight and some of the MMA.
Against Gallen?
Yeah,
Paul Gallen. Yeah.
And then some of the MMA trips that I went on, just to be welcome into the camp, MMA over at Tiger Muay Thai and all that sort of stuff as well. That was probably, you know, and obviously being at Jackson Wigglejohns, having those moments of being really close friends with Diego Sanchez, who everyone loves. But, you know, the Mark Hunt asking me personally to, you know, I want you to be coaching me for this. And obviously I wanted Rob in on it as well, because Rob's eye for detail is very, very good.
Yeah.
That was the best. Probably the worst, and, you know, no fault of anything, but probably when with Ross Pearson and we're all going, first round we're going beautiful, you know, with Dan Hooker over in New Zealand. I thought, man, this, you know, Ross is doing everything right. We're doing great. And it was just that moment where Dan sort of landed that knee and then knocked him out in regards to going in head down sort of thing. But dealing with Ross Pearson in fight camps, man, he's nothing professional as well. But to be honest, I wouldn't say that's the bad part. That's just like a downside of coaching.
A loss is a loss.
Loss is a loss.
As long as you've done the, you know, all you can do.
Yeah.
That's all. Anyone's got a puncher's chance in any fight.
To be honest, in the martial arts journey that I've had as a coach, I really haven't. I can't say I haven't had a bad moment. You know, there's frustrating moments and all that, but there's no times I've ever said, I'm giving this up. That's it. I've never had those moments because I've enjoyed the journey and going back to the good parts of coaching, not only just professional coaches like with Mark Hunt, but a lot of the youth stuff that I've done, having young, you know, disengaged teenagers come in, and you might get 1 out of the 10 that Rob and I have coached through our time and let them train for free and be around positive people. Even to this day, we might travel back to Tamworth and we got a young kid who come through the school system that we coached, and he comes to meet us and he's got a little child now and, you know, oh, this is Uncle Rich and Rob and like those sort of things. To people, it's not really that much to people, but the youth and changing youth's life in teenagers' life, that's what I've been really passionate about for so many years.
So is that your new? You've done the elite athletes. You've done your own personal journey through the martial arts and through all the challenges that come with that. You've had businesses, both the corporate and in the gym world. You guys run a tight ship in whatever you do. So is your calling now, as we head to your 50th birthday, which is a big milestone, as you head to your 50th now, what would you say the next 10 years of your life, if you could pick where you wanted to be and what you want to be doing, what would that look like? Well,
as we've spoken about, I don't really know. Like, I mean, I love the fight game, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's a beautiful sport with sometimes not so much good people in it, but I love the art of it. I love the MMA striking. I love the boxing striking. I love seeing the changes in young people and fighters that we get. I'm probably at an age now where I don't take on too many unless they give me 100%.
Yeah.
But Melbourne is my home now, and we've got a great gym, Brooklyn Fitness Centre and Brooklyn Boxing Club, and we do some great stuff over on the west side, but the golfing, I've taken up golfing again after all these years, and I'm hitting off 5 handicaps. So I'm enjoying the challenges of what the brain has for the golf.
Yep.
So that's been a really big, I'm loving that again. I'm loving the obviously the podcast because, one, I've got a lot of contacts, and 2, I'm just really fascinated by people's stories.
Sharing the stories.
I love sharing stories, and I think it's a good thing not only for my guest and I to talk about, but for young people and older people to hear different stories, because they might think, I know that dude, and then they hear things and go, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yep.
So that's been a really like a hobby come a passion.
Yep.
And really just that sort of being there for me kids, and I'm not sort of looking to pretty much go too much into working me crack hole off for too much longer. I like just chilling out and having my time. And
it's not about the material things anymore.
Definitely not.
So you've done that. As I said, your time on the Sunshine Coast, you were flying.
Traveling
and we missed a very important part in that little Sunshine Coast bit for the Thai boxing community. You guys did some big things, you had the likes of Sanchai, and you did some great shows, back in the day, Tony Hill and Kurt Finlayson, some of the absolute warriors of Thai boxing. People talk about some of the guys going around now, but for mine, going back to those years,
early
that was
days.
when the Thai boxing was tough in Australia.
Especially Queensland was like charging on, and you had the Tony Hills, you had the Cockburns, you had the Sorens, Nuggets, like those type of people, and Kurt Finlayson, Rob sort of mentioned the idea of let's bring Sanchai, and no other promoter had brought Sanchai to Australia before. So we were the first promotion to bring Sanchai to Australian shores.
Well, I remember going to that nightclub with Sanchai and you guys after, and me and him having a beer, and he is the funniest little fella you ever meet, Sanchai. Such a cool dude, and so respectful too. And he was just loving being in Australia, and he was so thankful that you guys brought him out.
Yeah.
And we look at him now, and he's a legend of Muay Thai, legitimately.
Still going and still winning every fight.
And still just pumping it. And I'm like, wow, were you guys ahead of your time with that or what, And at the Sunshine Coast Thai Boxing Centre.
Yeah,
up
Joey
there,
Hilton.
Joe Hilton, a big shout out to Joe, a man who's done so much for Muay Thai in Australia, and there's, probably doesn't get the recognition that he deserves these days.
He was a big influence on the Thai boxing on Sunshine Coast for me and Rob. And that's probably, if I'm going to say anything, who taught me how to do actual pad holding properly.
Yep.
Would be Joe Hilton. Not only just holding him properly and doing the freestyle pad holding, but the dedication.
Yeah.
That dude was in the gym at 4:00 in the mornings, every single morning, Monday to Friday, do his busy work through the day, and then he'd be back doing pads in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And this went on 15, 20, 30 years.
Brady Stolder and all those guys that trained with him too, still going. And
some of the champions he produced, but just his mentoring of me personally through the pool business, because he got me into the pools.
Right. Yeah, correct. Yeah,
And then, but just watching him hold pads, I really took a lot away from that. And he probably doesn't know it that much because I've never really talked to him about. But Joe Hilton was the one who really instilled that seed for me to want to learn how to hold pads properly as a pad holder.
Yeah.
And he was amazing human when you see what he done with promotions but holding pads. Fucking insane.
I'm glad we circled around back to that, Richie, because mate, you know, and I've known you for a long time, as we alluded to at the start, and I've learned some stuff about you, and certainly it'll make our friendship stronger, knowing that we share even more than what I thought we did. You know, you're a credit to yourself and your family, brother, and
Appreciate it, brother.
you know, the Rich Life podcasts are just fantastic, and I know from inception when you spoke to me about the concept of doing this, you know, you're passionate and you're doing great things. And I suppose in closing, if you've got any advice out there for anyone in the martial arts or indeed in life, any dads that have been challenged with situations, you know, that they've, you know, you've gone through, what would that be?
Well, as I always say to the guests, you know, what is your rich life these days? My rich life these days is knowing my daughter and son are happy and content, and obviously doing their thing that they're happy with. My advice to anyone is to be happy yourself. Be happy with yourself and love yourself first, because a lot of people try and go out, and I was a victim of that. They try and go out and find happiness and love in everyone else. But I've had a big saying when I've done a lot of mentoring with young kids and adults is our happiness is like a chain. It's a full chain. So when it's going around and around, that's your happiness. You got to try and find what your happiness is. Love yourself, be happy with yourself. And then if anyone else comes into your chain, they're just another link of happiness. So they're adding to your happiness. Yeah. They aren't your happiness. So a lot of people then go, oh, I'm lonely, I need this, I need that. But what you've got to think is, I'm happy now. I'm happy with myself. If you come into my life, you're going to add to my happiness, because if you leave, I've still got my happiness. Yeah, that's probably my biggest thing that
a great analogy.
An old rich would say to a young rich is find your happiness, what makes you happy, and love yourself instead of looking for it in all the wrong places.
Yeah, and the short-term gratification things that they'll give you happiness. It's, you know, we talk about the drugs and the alcohol and the whatever else,
which we've all been through and we've all done, and
give you that momentary buzz, but you sometimes left a little bit empty afterwards. So
100%,
you know, and I think the martial arts is something that is, if it's a constant in your life or any sort of good positive physical activity, because mate, you're in great nick too. You train hard. You know, just check out his Instagram. You see him doing chin ups and shit. Hey, and
that gets back to just being a mental thing too. Like I've got to train an hour a day myself for my mental health. Yeah. I've got to have ice baths for my mental health. Yeah. There's a lot of things I've got to, as I say each day with the torture chamber, where I find my own happiness and my own content
to get you out of that,
to get me out of that whole torture chamber. So the martial arts was my lifesaver. Yep. I will say that. Martial arts saved my life. The ongoing training now I've finished, I see a lot of martial arts finish their career and they go, fuck, get fat, take drugs, get on the alcohol, whatever, and they lose sight of who they are.
I think, because I want to pull you up on that, to me, that's not martial artists, that's fighters. When we talk about fighters, and this is essentially for me the difference. If you're a fighter, it's for a period of time.
That's right.
If you're a martial artist, it's for a lifetime. And that's, you know, I will be trained until the day I die, or my body can still do it.
Yep.
But I see, and there's been a lot of guys, they fight, they get that gratification. They're the man. You're the man. But then they don't pass on the knowledge.
That's right.
They don't live the ethos of a martial artist. So that's a difference and especially now when we talk about MMA.
That's right.
Guys, it's mixed martial arts. But I'll argue that point. It's not mixed martial arts, it's mixed fighting.
That's right.
Because they're learning to fight. They're not learning, a lot of them, to be martial artists.
That's right.
Because to be a martial artist, you have to go through a hierarchical system. You have to do the gradings. You have to do the time. You have to be disciplined. You have to pay respect to your trainers and to the high ranks.
Yep.
There's not a lot of that in the fight game. And 100%. When you talk about, MMA, well, they're in, they're out. That's they get there's Instagram fighters are plenty these days. Right, yep. And then you got your celebrity fighters, and it's like, man, it's a whole shit show at the moment.
Yeah, it is. But
you're a martial artist, my friend. Let me say that to you.
Yep.
You live a martial artist code and lifestyle, and you do it. You're doing it to 50 plus.
No,
and
appreciate
that's where fighters come and go, but martial artists last forever.
100%. Unbelievable.
So I think, man, we've done the full circle with the Rich Life. It's been a blast, and I've loved it.
Mate, been good. I appreciate your time, brother. I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you having this conversation and bringing me in to be a part of this.
Yeah.
It's a special thing for me, and I'm honoured that you've got me to sit with you. And, mate, maybe we'll do it again.
Maybe,
and
mate.
we talk
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. With
when we're 99 going on 100.
So, thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it, brother.